Welcome to the Great Basin Smoke Dispersion Briefing for Friday, May 12th. This is Gina McGuire. Over the last 24 hours, we've seen light amounts of precipitation over central and northern Nevada up into Idaho. However, over the last 7 days, we've seen higher amounts of precipitation in parts of the central Idaho mountains and over western and central Nevada and areas of the Arizona Strip into the southern half of Utah. Some of these areas were above normal as far as precipitation over the last week. However, looking back at the last 2 weeks, we've seen largely well below normal precipitation across most of the Great Basin, with the exception of parts of the Sierra Front, the central Idaho mountains, and again over the far southern areas of the Great Basin. Looking at the infrared satellite image from earlier this morning shows an area of low pressure off the northwest coast with stronger southwest winds and southwest flow over parts of the western half of the Great Basin. The stronger ridge of high pressure that brought much warmer and drier conditions to the area has now shifted east over the Rocky Mountains. If we look at the ventilation index for today, with those stronger southwest winds moving in advance of that area of low pressure, we have good dispersion really in most areas of the Great Basin, with the exception of parts of the higher elevations of central Idaho. If we look at the individual components of the ventilation index, you can see the stronger winds, especially over central and northern areas of the Great Basin, where we'll see the strongest winds today over the eastern half of Nevada, into Idaho, the western half of Utah and the Arizona Strip, where wind gusts will exceed 40 or 50 miles per hour at times. Also, mixing heights will be quite high in all areas of the Great Basin. Looking at Saturday, this area of low pressure moves eastward. It will also keep drier air over the southern and eastern half of the Great Basin with low relative humidity and those stronger winds, and some moisture over the northern half of the area. Looking at the ventilation index, again with these continued gusty winds, we will see good dispersion really in most areas. Looking at the individual components, the strongest winds on Saturday move over generally the southern and eastern half of Utah, where wind gusts will exceed 50 miles per hour with relative humidity below 15 or 20%. So we will see some increases in fire potential, especially if we do have starts in some of the drier lower elevation areas. Also, gusty winds will continue over the southern and eastern half of Nevada and shift to a west-northwesterly direction. Mixing heights will remain relatively high, with the exception of parts of northern Nevada into central Idaho, which will be somewhat moderate. If we look at Sunday, this main system moves east and we have a deeper trough developing off the west coast, and this will keep moisture in place over the western and northern half of the Great Basin, with still drier air and gusty winds over southern and eastern areas. Dispersion will start to decrease over the northern areas of the Great Basin as winds decrease and moisture moves in, but still remain quite good over the southern half of the Great Basin. On Sunday, again, those gusty winds will continue over eastern and southern areas of Utah into the Arizona Strip, but will not be quite as strong as what we will see here over the next couple of days. Much lighter winds, again, over the northern half of the Great Basin. Mixing heights will still remain relatively good, despite still poor dispersion because of these very light winds. Looking at the forecast clearing index for Utah over the next few days, and it's no surprise with these gusty winds moving across the Great Basin that we would see high clearing indices, especially today and Saturday, and then decreasing on Sunday over northwest Utah as those winds decrease, but still remain quite high over the rest of the state. If we look at the overall forecast amount of precipitation over the next few days, again the focus will be over the northern half of the Great Basin, with still areas below about a ½ inch of precipitation total across Nevada, a little bit higher as you get up into the central Idaho mountains, but still not a big precipitation event here over the next few days. As we go into next week, this unsettled weather pattern will continue across the Great Basin, with another trough moving eastward on Monday, which will be somewhat cooler and spreading precipitation a little bit further south. However, still areas of the Arizona Strip and far southern Nevada and southern Utah will remain dry. Dispersions will remain fairly good on Monday as well as this trough moves across. If we move on into Tuesday, we have a stronger, colder area of low pressure that will be dropping south over far western areas of the Great Basin, and this will also allow precipitation amounts to increase, especially over the northern 2/3 of the area, and temperatures to get quite a bit colder. After the above normal temperatures we've seen recently, temperatures will steadily decrease as we go into the weekend, and especially early next week, we'll see temperatures 15 degrees or so below normal. This will also bring snow levels down fairly low, especially over western and northern Nevada as we move through the early to mid portion of next week. Dispersion will remain quite good across most areas with the exception of the higher elevations of the Sierra. If we move into Wednesday, this area of low pressure tracks eastward with the heavier precipitation now moving over the eastern 2/3 of the Great Basin with again still cold temperatures for mid-May. Dispersion will remain somewhat good with the exception of parts of southwest Wyoming into northern Utah. On Thursday, this main trough finally moves eastward, and we're seeing more of a building ridge of high pressure off the west coast, which will eventually bring warmer and drier weather to the Great Basin, but still on Thursday, the eastern half of the area will remain under cool, wet conditions. Dispersion will remain good with the exception of parts of the eastern half of Utah, which will be somewhat moderate. If we look at the overall forecast amount of precipitation for just days 4 and 5, which takes us from Monday morning through Wednesday morning, and you can see despite the lighter amounts of precipitation we'll see over the next few days, precipitation will get quite a bit heavier as we go into early next week, with many areas seeing over a ½ inch or even over an inch of total precipitation. If we look a little bit further ahead into the third week of May, we will continue to see chances for below normal temperatures and above normal precipitation over mainly the eastern half of the Great Basin, with a return to more warmer and drier weather over far western areas. That concludes our briefing for today. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Thank you for listening.